Hey guys, Lytane here, and October is finally over, which means I can move on to something that is not horror related. So I just finished this big 4-part horror series where I looked at 4 different things and I had this massive story that went over all 4 parts, and it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work. So I just want to do something smaller for this episode, a nice little bite-sized one, and the only thing I could think of is a tiny game, an arcade game, and the game that I'm going to be looking at to see if it's worth it is Bobble. Back in the 80s, everyone went to arcades in order to play their favorite games. These games were stuff like Donkey Kong, or Galaga, or even Dragon's Lair. These games mostly revolved around points and bragging rights, and they ate up a lot of quarters in order to play them. In 1986, Taito released Bobble as an arcade machine. As this is an arcade game, the plot to it is incredibly simple. Baron Von Blubba has kidnapped the main character's girlfriends. Bobby and Bobby then go to rescue them, only to be turned into bubble-blowing dragons. And they get the nickname Bub and Bob. After that, Baron Von Blubba goes back into his cave, which is 100 floors deep, in order to do whatever he wants to do with these lovely ladies that he just captured. Bub and Bob will not rest easy. They are still on the case, and they're going to rescue their girlfriends at any cost. They soon realize that their bubbles have a magical power to them, that they can trap the enemies that Blubba has been throwing at them. So now the brothers have to blow bubbles, pop them, and descend 100 floors in order to rescue their girlfriends, whilst listening to the same song over and over and over again. Bubble has been released on so many different consoles, and each one of them adding a little bit of a tweak or something to it, and the one that I played the most was on the PlayStation 1. It's not a graphically crazy game for the PlayStation 1 because it is an arcade cabinet, but there are a few little changes and neat little touches to the PS1 version. But for the most part, I'm just going to be talking about the game as a whole, and yes, there might be tiny little differences between the versions, but yeah, the core concepts stay the same. You play as Bub in a 1-player game, or as Bub and Bob in a 2-player game, and your goal, as I said, is to descend 100 floors. In order to do so, you have to destroy all the enemies on the screen. Due to its nature, the controls in this game are incredibly simple. All you can do is move left and right, jump, and blow a bubble. That's it, just 2 buttons and directions. That's all you get. So in order to complete a level, you run over to one of the enemies, you blow a bubble, and then they get captured inside of it. Then you have a small window of time in order to pop that bubble. If you do not pop the bubble, then they break free, angering them, making them faster and harder to kill. But if you do pop that bubble, they're dead and they turn into little fruit, which are points, because like I said, arcades used to be all about damn points. So as you're killing enemies, you get rid of all the enemies on the screen and you get to go to the next one, which is really cool, and they change all different layouts. Like every level is unique, so that's 100 unique levels, which is really good and really original for something in 1986 as well. So whilst controlling Bub or Bob, there are a few things that you can do. As you blow bubbles, they linger on the screen for a little bit of time, and depending on the level, they either stay in place or they float upwards, or possibly even downwards. You can then jump on top of a bubble, and if you jump on top and you're holding the jump button, you bounce on the bubble. This allows you to get to higher areas, or even to higher bad guys or whatever, or even get out of pits, because there are a few levels that have pits in them. There are a few special bubbles around the levels as well, where one of them has lightning, which if you pop, the lightning goes across the screen and anything in its way gets killed. There's also the extend bubbles, which if you collect each letter, E-X-T-E-N-D, I can still spell, you get to go and warp to the very next level, so it finishes the level that you're on instantly, which is really cool. This leads to the difficulty of the game. Now, it starts off really simple, and yeah, you might die on the first level because you're just getting used to the controls, but it isn't too bad. The enemies are very easy to figure out. They just walk from left to right, and they just drop down, and you just blow a bubble, and it's easy to kill them. You have these mechanical little robot things that go left and right, and they're probably the easiest thing in the game, and then you have other bad guys, like this big purple, like, I don't know, slug-looking thing. It's really hard to describe, but you can see it on the screen. That flies around as well, and it goes in diagonals, and it can bounce off walls, and it gets really frustrating trying to catch it. The game introduces these enemies usually one at a time, so you get used to them before they start throwing them together. So then in later levels you'll be fighting somebody that is a purple ghost, and you'll be fighting the little robot things at the same time. Now, whilst the levels themselves don't have any level hazards, there are things that get in your way. Like I said, there are pits. This, coupled with the enemies, adds to some interesting level designs and really hard and thought-provoking parts. So each level is a puzzle. You have to figure out where you should be taking down the enemies, which ones you should be taking down first, which areas you should go to, which areas might be safe, especially as the enemies have unique but predictable patterns. And then as you get good at the game, you can learn that, oh, this enemy will go over here, so then you can go there first and then you can capture it. But just figuring out these puzzles is really fun and interesting. There are a few things in this game that do help you out as well. You can collect different types of candy which add a special effect to your bubble ability. There is one which makes your bubbles blow faster, there's one that make your bubbles blow longer, and there's even shoes that you can get that makes you run a little bit faster, I believe, if memory serves, but they only last until you die. So it's much like an old school arcade game. You get all these power-ups and you feel really good about yourself, and then you die, and then now you're back to nothing, which really sucks. The best way, in my opinion, to experience this game is in two-player. You and a friend going through the entire 100 levels together is so much fun, and because you're figuring out each puzzle and you're working off each other and you're both collecting the bad guys. The bad guys don't change patterns, and they aren't any added bad guys because there's two players, so it does make it slightly easier in that regard. But you guys have to play off each other. You have to be in sync, because you can't be both going for one enemy whilst another one's coming down, because then you might both die. They don't care, they just do whatever they want. So it's fun to play with a friend and get through all these levels, and then as you get further and further into the game, trying to figure out like when they get really hard, and then one person gets stuck in a bottomless pit and you're like, oh my god, I have to do all the work now. It's really fun, and it's really good to play with a friend. Even though there are 100 levels in this game, there is only one boss that you will fight right at the end, which is Blubba. He looks like one of the drunken enemies, but it's just a giant, and the only way that you can hurt him is with the electricity bubbles. So you have to wait for them to come up, and then you have to pop him against a wall and they fly across the screen and hit him. Hit him enough times and he finally dies. It's a pretty difficult fight because he's bouncing around the room and he's throwing projectiles at you, and it's really difficult, especially if you have another person, because their lightning will hit you and stun you for a couple seconds as well. But this is where the game becomes an absolute dick to you. Now, if you had finished this game by yourself, you slugged through 100 levels and you feel really good about yourself because you finally beat the game, you will get a message saying, hey, that's great, congratulations, you beat the game, but you should play with a friend if you want the real ending. Oh my god, really? That is just so cruel. Okay, I guess I'll find a friend and I'll beat the game again. Beating the game with a friend does unlock a slightly different ending because you did save both girlfriends this time and not just the one from Bub, which is great. But then it tells you that, okay, now that you've finished it with a friend, that's great and all, but there's another mode, which is like a hard mode. Now you have to finish the whole game again with a friend on hard mode, and it's like, ugh, again? You just made me play through this game twice. Okay, I'll do it again. Inputting a code turns the game into hard mode, which doesn't really affect much of the game until you reach the very end, in which it gives you a few extra really difficult levels. And if you finally manage to beat them and the boss, and you've done it all with your friend, you finally get the real ending, which was definitely unsatisfying because you just rescue the princesses and you go back to being human. Hooray! I'm so glad I used all my time on that. Bubble is, in my opinion, worth it. It is such a fun arcade game, especially if you're going to play with a friend. The fact that each level is unique and there are 100 of them is just baffling for the time. The fact that it is so simple to pick up and to play and to teach another person, but incredibly hard to master, makes it that much more fun. I really enjoy this game, and I really enjoy playing it with another person, because when you're with them and you're laughing and you're just having fun, it's just a great co-op game. It isn't without its flaws though. It is a very difficult game, and the endings are really, really ridiculous. And a lot of the times and a lot of the levels, it just seems unfair. The fact that there is no password or no save function, so if you play through the game, you have to start at level 1 every single time, makes it really, really challenging. Also, if you played this in the arcade, you would have gone through so much money, because just trying to stay alive, and then by the time you get to the end, and then you lose all your continues, and you're gonna put more money in, man, this would have definitely eaten up a lot of my money. The last thing I want to say though is the music. It's one song that repeats forever, and my mum absolutely hates it, but my sister and I love it, and we sing it, and it's great, and it does get stuck in your head because it's so simple, but it's so annoying at the same time. I fully understand if you don't like this song, and it's been the only song playing for this entire episode just for that same reason. Man, my sister and I used to play this game so much that my mum hated it. She just absolutely hated it. When we turn it on and she heard the music, and she would just be like, "You're playing that on mute, you know, you can't play that game if I'm around," because the music was just so annoying to her. But my sister and I, of course, loved it, and we loved tormenting my mum just that little bit, because, you know, that's what kids do. But anyways, that's the end. Tell me what you think of Bubble Bobble. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever played it before? I know a lot of people have not played it, but they do know the characters of Bub and Bob because they were in different games. Bust a Move, the bubble shooting game from Taito as well. So a lot of the people know the characters, and there have been other sequels and other games made with Bub and Bob as well, so that's pretty cool. But tell me what you think about this one, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!